Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Rajeev Kapur with me. Rajeev is the CEO of 1105 Media, and he's also the author of Chase Greatness. And one of the things that I think you're going to really take away from his story as you hear it today is being willing to take the next step to get to where you really want to be. And so I think oftentimes we can find ourselves just wanting to stay in one spot. And we're going to hear how being willing to take the risk, being willing to take the leap will pay off. So Rajeev, thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited, for good things. And so we're really glad to be here today.
You bet. Now, with your story, once again, first generation, folks came to America and you were born in California. So talk a little bit about those early years and being kind of, the first generation American here in the States.
Yeah, look, I mean, I had a nice, interesting childhood. I think the challenge for my childhood was, I'm 55 now, so people can do the math. But I'm a child of I was born late 60s, child of the 70s, kind of a thing, right? And when my parents came here, they left India at a time, and they're here, and I think in their mind they're like, well, how do we raise our kids? And I have a younger brother and a younger sister, with the values and norms we grew up with, and understand and realize that now they're here and there's a different set of values and norms, all fairly the same thing, but still different culturally. Things are different, right? Yep. And so for me, I think the hard part was, you've got, I'm growing up and I've got one foot in the Indian culture, one foot in the Western culture, and then who are you? Who are you? Like, what's your identity? And there's this thing called, in the Indian culture, people make fun of us who were born here, called ABCD. And ABCD stands for American Born Confused Desi. And the word Desi is a slang term for Indian, right? So I'm American born, but who are you? Are you Indian? Are you American? What are you, right? And so, and I didn't have an accent and whatever, right? And so it's like, so to me, it's like you look and you feel like you're an American. You feel like you're there, and right? So it's you played soccer and you played baseball and you played basketball, but in India they're playing cricket and other things, right? And so I still don't even watch cricket, right? So whatever. The point I'm making here is that, like, just who are you? What's your identity, and how do you grow kind of within that? And so that was some of the challenges I had to face. I mean, not major challenges. I lived in a nice suburban. I actually had a white picket fence for a house, and it was great. My parents did their best, and it was fine. And I think I did well. But a lot of it, you kind of end up finding your own way, because my parents had no experience. They had never gone through it. Right. And so a lot of times I was kind of left to myself to figure it out myself. And, through friends or whatever the case might be, or mentors. And so that's kind of what I had to do. And, I think it made me a better person for it. And I don't know if I'd be sitting in the chair I'm in today if it wasn't for that journey I went through to discover who I was at an early age.
Absolutely. Now, as you're growing up, every parent has a dream and aspiration for their child. And very few parents have the aspiration of a child to go into a sales type of a role. Not that it's a bad job. It's just, they usually, think of something else, or maybe, hey, they'll follow in my footsteps. But talk a little bit about getting your start, and once again, working with a company called Gateway, which if you're too young, you may not even recognize the name. But at one point, this was a powerhouse technology company.
Yeah, I mean, look, Gateway at the time was growing faster and was bigger than even potentially Dell and others at the time, and Apple, but they made some missteps and they did what they did, and that's fine. They're gone now. But look, I mean, I was always kind of a techie geek growing up as a kid. I was always into video games and all that stuff, and computers and all that, and a little bit of a nerd. And I mean, look, my dad is an engineer, and so in the Indian culture, they put a lot of value on education. Not that others don't, but if you look at it, if you look at in India itself, there's not a big sports culture, right? And here there's a big sports culture. So there in India, it's like the joke is the spelling bee is the Indian Super Bowl. And so you kind of grow up in this world, and it's like, and so they put a premium on education. And because of that, it's like, oh, you got to be a doctor, you got to be an engineer, or whatever, right? And so those are the two big things in India, right? And all that is because, if you are those things, then you're gonna have a better life, and family, and oh, you need to marry, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't know, I had no desire to do either one of those things, and so I was kind of going more up on the marketing side of things. I had summer jobs, and I got one of my first sales jobs was a shoe salesman, and I did really well, making a good money on this thing called commission. I'm like, oh, this thing is pretty good. It was pretty easy. And
Yeah.
so, I had done an internship in Southern California with this technology company. And I was bouncing back and forth between Australia, the US, and in Paris. And so that was a hell of an internship.
Yeah.
And when the company was really challenged, and my mentor there said, "Hey, there's this great company in South Dakota, in Sioux City. It was on the North Sioux side.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, there's Sioux City, Iowa, North Sioux City, South Dakota, and South Sioux City, Nebraska. Bill's in Omaha, Nebraska, and so you'd fly in, and so you basically live on the Iowa side. You drive through South Sioux City, Nebraska. You get to North Sioux City, South Dakota. So you go through 3 states every day. So the job was 100% commission sales, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm pretty good sales, and commission's great, and so I could probably do really well at this thing. And so I moved out from California. It was after I graduated. I finished that internship, and my parents weren't all that happy. They're like, "You're gonna do what? You're gonna be a sales guy, and you're gonna be living in Iowa." Yeah, it's like the complete anti-Indian thing you could do.
Right.
And so, but I did it, and I did really well, and worked my way up there. And then after doing it for 2 years and realizing I can't handle the 56 degree below zero wind chill factors of Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, I decided to go. I got recruited and went to Dell, and I got accepted a job at Dell, and joined Dell in '93. And about 6 months into my job at Dell, I became one of Michael Dell's first executive assistants for a little while, for about a year or so. And then I kind of worked my way up there, and eventually ran a big part of Dell's Asian business. And there you go.
Yeah. So I want to rewind back to making that life choice to come out to the Midwest. I think for so many people, we value those that are closest to us opinions on what they think is good for us or what they think is best for us. And oftentimes what someone thinks is best for you is not necessarily what's best for you in regards to it's the most opportunity. It can be what's going to protect you the most, right? It's going to give you the least amount of risk or the least chance of failure. So talk a little bit about being willing to make a choice that you believed was best for you, even if some of those people that were very close to you did not necessarily believe that same truth in that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Phil, I kind of realized early on, and I kind of discovered this, I think, after that I was really into that internship. I really kind of wanted to stay at that company. And then when they were having some financial problems, it was like, well, I was kind of bummed. But then I realized two things. I realized two truths at that point. As a young person, you have to go to the job. And there was another computer company out here called AST Computers. And AST was as big as an Oracle, whatever these guys were at the time. Yeah. Dell was on the world. And then they also went out of business long-term. And Dell put them out of business also. And I had an opportunity to go work with them, and they said no. And so then I had the Gateway offer, and I said yes to that. And so you have to go to the job. And it's either I did that or I didn't know what I was going to do, right? I didn't want to live it on me. I was going to live with my parents or whatever. And I could go get my MBA. I could have gone to USC, get my MBA. I could have done a lot of other things, and who knows where my life would have gone. I would have found some other technology company, or maybe I would have sold shoes at Nordstrom's for a while until I figured something out. I don't know. But the point I'm making is that I realized then, I said, I remember having a phone interview, and I hung up the phone and talking to this guy, Todd Osborne, who was still friends with me, who was my boss at Gateway. And I remember hanging up the phone saying, if I don't do this, what am I going to do? And I realized that, hey, you know what? You are 21 years old and you got no commitments. Go have an adventure and go to the job. And, and I remember talking to an old professor friend of mine who's giving me examples of people in the news industry.
Yeah.
How they have to sometimes go cut their teeth in small towns before they work their way up. And I kind of said, maybe this is my way of cutting my teeth, prove myself, and let's see where I could go from there. And at the time, you're thinking like, oh, I can work at IBM, whatever, right? And so, and there was no real Microsoft then. Really, it was so small, and and there was no Apple really. It was as small as Apple IIs, and we don't know about Apple all that much. And so I said, yeah. And so you realize that you have to go to the job. That's the first thing you realize. And the second thing I realized was that if you really want to get ahead in your career, do the hard thing. Raise your hand for the hardest job you can possibly find, either you can do or within the organization. Because if you can make that work, you're going to be a hero. And you're going to skyrocket your career. And even if you don't make it work, but you still raise your hand and you tried and you did everything possible, and you put in that 110% effort that people talk about, and it still doesn't work, you're still going to be viewed as someone who is willing to stand up and lead from the front. And those are the two things I realized, and that's what I did.
That's really good. So to fast forward to back where you're saying, so you end up making the transition from Gateway to Dell, and you get to be kind of right next to Michael Dell. So talk a little bit about just learning leadership from somebody that's running, the organization like Dell.
Yeah, so here's the thing. So Michael's 3 years older than me, right? So I went to Dell when I was 23, 24. And so he was like 27, right? And I think the average age of the company when I joined was like 23. And so you got a bunch of 20-year-olds running around running this multi-billion business. No one knows what the F they were doing, right? And so I'll tell you this, the biggest lesson I learned from Michael was hire people smarter than you, give them the tools to do their job and get out of their way. Michael knew, I think Michael's biggest asset is he knew what he wasn't good at. And he knew that he needed to hire people around him and put the best around him if he was going to have Dell continue to be a successful organization. And that's what he did. Most people would be threatened by that. Michael wasn't threatened by that. Why? Well, number one, the name of the computer is Dell, right? And number two is he's an icon, and number three was he's a visionary, right? So what was he good at? He was good at the product side, right? He was really good at that, right? He understood kind of the sales side, but he didn't know manufacturing operations and those things. So he went and got amazing people. He wasn't the greatest marketer in the world, so he got amazing marketers, and so he got amazing facilities operations people, and so. And that's what he did. And so he surrounded himself with this amazing group of people. And it was amazing to see and watch. I mean, Phil, I'd be in his office for meetings, and you get phone calls, and it'd be Bill Gates on the phone asking for stuff. And you're like, for having me sit in those calls and listen, or Andy Grove from Intel or whatever, right? To be on these calls and listen, be like, holy shit, what am I doing here? Right? This is crazy, right? I mean, I was just selling shoes a couple years ago, what I mean? So this is like pretty cool. And, and so, so that's, I think, the biggest thing I can tell you. I learned from Michael how to be a leader. And he's always, led from the front. And I'll tell you a funny story if you want about Michael. And so whenever people see me, they, hey, Rajeev, you golf. And I don't golf. And that really shocks a lot of people. And they're like, well, why don't you golf? And I said, well, my golf career got killed by Michael back in the mid 90s. And we were at this thing called the Field Readiness Seminar. It's also called FRS. And it was, I think, our very first one. And that's when you bring in all the salespeople and the marketers from all around the country and maybe even the world. They came in, and we were at the Austin, where UT plays basketball. I can't remember the name of the stadium now, but it's where basketball stadium in Austin. And we're there. There's like maybe 3,000-4,000 people there. And it's great events, kickoff, and it's like talking about all the new products, marketing initiatives, all these things. And there's a little Q&A, and one of the guys on my sales team, because after I did the Michael thing, I went to the sales group, whatever. And so one of the guys raised his hand and said, hey, Michael, one of my clients wants to golf. Would you be willing to come out and go golfing with us? And he looked at all 3,000 of us, whatever people in the room. Then he looked at us in deadpan and said, if you have time to golf, your quota is too low. And so that kind of killed golf at Dell for about 10 years. And so I never go golf. So that was one of my funny stories about Michael and Dell. So
that's great. So as Dell is progressing and you are progressing as well, at some point in kind of the late 90s, you become the director of the Western region for Dell. So talk a little bit about, what that entailed for you, and then kind of your management style at that point when you're taking over a region.
Yeah, no, look, so I was, so Dell had different sales groups, divisions, right?
Yeah.
And so you had these amazing groups, you had these amazing divisions that focused around government, around education, around medical. You had folks who focused on the Fortune 500 groups, whatever the case might be.
Yep.
But where Dell lacked was going after that SMB business,
Mm.
right? That kind of small mom and pop, figure 10, 15, 20 person company to the 2, 3, 4,000 person company kind of in that space. And when you think about that market, there's millions of those companies. There's only 500 Fortune 500 companies,
Right.
right? And everybody was killing themselves. It was a bloodbath, right? Dell, HP, IBM, Gateway, whatever, they're all killing themselves fighting for that small margin up there.
Yeah.
And so then we created this whole new group and we went after that. And that's the group I ended up running the West Coast for. And for me, what was interesting was I kind of took Michael's view of hiring the best. And so we actually completely flipped the model.
Mm.
So in our larger, those Fortune 500 groups, you'd have one inside salesperson for every one outside salesperson. So it's a really expensive sales model,
Yeah.
right? But what we did was we said, no, we're going to have 3 inside salespeople for every one outside salesperson, a much lower cost model.
Yeah.
And we're only going to send the outside account executives to the larger deals, the larger opportunities. And we're going to try to handle all the other ones via the phone or remote. And now it's interesting because now everything is done remote, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of what we did. That's the thing we pioneered. That's the thing we structured. We implemented brand new marketing tools called the RAD process. It's actually used to be called ADR, acquisition, development, retention, but ADR doesn't make sense. So you flip it, call it RAD, RAD instead of ADR, RAD.
Yeah.
And so we implemented all these different marketing tools. One of the great things we did was I allowed my team to come up with different ideas to go after their acquisition customers. So an example of something we did was we would run marketing plays, sales plays. A play is like a football play. So if you're a football coach on the sideline, you send in a play to the quarterback, right? Well, in my case, if I'm the coach and these are my players, we would run plays. And so one of the things, so let's say you, Phil, are the CIO for some 1,000-person organization in Los Angeles, and we're trying to break into you. So what we would do is, for example, one thing we would do is we would maybe send to your secretary or your assistant a pie, and we'd have a piece of pie missing, and it would say, "Hey, Phil, at Dell, you get the whole pie."
Yeah.
Who doesn't want a free pie?
Right.
And then say, if you want the other piece, if you want a full pie, call us and we'll deliver a full pie. And 8 out of 10 times that worked.
Yep.
Right. Another example of things we would do is back before smartphones, they had those little push button walkie talkies.
Yeah.
We would send the CIO one walkie talkie. And then the empty spot where the other one would be a note that said, Dell, you get the best communication in the industry. You're always there for you, team. We'd list down who your team was, blah, 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 right? And if you're interested in learning more, and if you want the second walkie-talkie, call us and we'll deliver it. And 9 out of 10 times, they want that second walkie-talkie. They take at least a 5-minute meeting with you because they want that second walkie-talkie to give to their kids.
Right.
Right. So we do these little marketing plays, but
Yeah.
the point of this is that these ideas and these programs came from the teams, and to be the best leader possible is you have to allow that ingenuity and curiosity to thrive at that team level, and that's what we did.
Yeah. So, as I hear you say that, one, I love the creativeness of, how you get in front of the people that you needed to be getting in front of. Those are great stories. I love that. But the second is just how pivotal it is if you're going to run a team to be able to take your ego out of it, right? Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of good ideas, and as the leader, you need to be able to listen to good ideas and say, all right, hey, these are good ideas. We're going to implement them. Or, all right, these aren't very good ideas, but appreciate you bringing them to the table, because the next time they might be the person with the good idea, right? So it's about encouraging and continuing to bring those ideas to the table.
Yeah, no, 100% correct. It's like, I would say that I was only successful at Dell because of my team and their ingenuity and their creativity. But we took those same ideas and thoughts, and we tried to implement that same model that we came up with in the U.S. to China and India, other parts of the world. In some cases it worked. In some cases we had to build a hybrid model based on what we knew. And in some cases it didn't. So
Yeah.
but it was great.
Now, as your time at Dell is going well, inevitably, what I tell people is, if you do what you do well, people will notice, right? And so, after our time at Dell, all of a sudden, a company called Smart Home kind of opens up, and we see an opportunity there. So, talk a little bit about why you made the transition, what you were looking for in the transition, and new role and position you had.
Yeah. So look, I had done a U.S. stint for Dell for a long time, and I wanted to do something international. And so I was in the U.S. for about 8-9 years. And when Michael called and said, Rajeev, I want you to move to China. And that was in 2000. And this was before the world moved to China.
Yeah.
Right. It was very hardcore. Not that it isn't now. Back then it was hardcore communist China and you had nothing. Now it's hardcore communist China, and at least you can go shopping at Gucci or whatever, right? Back then, you can go to a nice restaurant. Back then, the only Western restaurant you could go to was at TGI Fridays at the end of Embassy Row. That was it. There was no other Western food in Beijing at the time.
Yeah.
And so I did that. So I did the China thing for a couple of years, then the South Asia thing for a couple of years. My second son was born in Singapore. And, when you're doing a role at a company like a Dell and you're working for a publicly traded company, every quarter is like 1 year.
Yep.
Because you run from the start of the first month of the quarter to the last month of the quarter, and you're going and you don't get any time off.
That's right.
And if you take and I mean time off, meaning it's not like you can breathe and exhale at the end of the quarter, because guess what? You got to start all over again 2 hours later.
Yep.
Right? And so 1 quarter is like 1 year. And so that would be the running joke at a publicly traded company. And so, man, I was just not seeing the kids, not having the best family life. And, the smart home thing kind of came up from an old friend of mine who was there. And they had, they were here in Irvine, California. And I kept our house out here. And so I said, you know what, maybe now is the time. And look, I realized I was never going to be the CEO of Dell because my name is not Dell. And so, and I always knew I kind of wanted to grow, and I was kind of hitting up, and family didn't want to go to back to Austin, Texas. And I don't blame them. But Austin now is a great place, but back then it was, maybe not the best for us. And so had an opportunity to go to London, didn't want to do the London thing because I've done the same thing, but instead of being in Singapore at the time, being in London, so traveling a lot, not seeing the family. And so I wanted to see my kids, and wanted my kids to be around grandparents and other, their cousins. And so we made the move back to Southern California, and the Smart Home thing came up. And it was interesting because when I joined Smart Home was a small company. It was like,
right. Yeah.
Like, 50 employees, like with, a little less than 20 million of revenue. And I did 20 million revenue a week. Right.
Right.
And so going from this big Fortune 500 company where you're growing and you've got all these great things, to come to a small company where if you make one mistake, you're screwed. Right. Like, you can make a mistake at Dell and it can be hidden. Not a big deal, because Dell's a $50 billion business and it's got more money than God. So if you make a mistake for $1 million, no big deal. You make a mistake in a $19 million business that costs $1 million, probably put the company out of business, right? Or laying off a bunch of people, right? So it's just totally different. And so that was a big culture shock for me to come in. And it probably took me 6 months to figure out what I was doing.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about growing and developing, from a starting standpoint. I think, it's, to your point, it's easy to look at Dell and say, oh, well, with unlimited resources, you could pretty much do whatever you'd like. But now you're at a company where, to your point, every dollar counts. Not everyone's got a company card. We're not taking people out to the fanciest restaurants. That's a very strategic lunch meeting. So talk a little bit about, getting started at a smaller level and really working and scaling and growing that.
Yeah, look, I'd never been in at that time, I'd never been in a really super small company, like, still $19-20 million business, right? So it's not like it was tiny, right? It's doing right. But I think the biggest part for me was there was a big mental challenge, right? And how do you pivot and adjust? And you come in pounding your chest saying, "Oh, I'm the guy from Dell."
Yeah.
You guys should listen to what I have to say. Oh, whatever. No one gives a shit.
Yeah, right.
I mean, really, nobody gave two shits where I was from, and
Yeah.
so all they cared about was doing a good job, making their numbers, getting a paycheck, and building their careers. And so you talked about earlier about checking your ego. You have to check your ego at the door and realize that once you do that, things kind of clear up for you. And and so and then go back and kind of learn. And so you have to realize, and then what you realize at the end of the day is that the same things that make you successful at a Fortune 500 company are the same things that can make you successful at a small $20 million business.
Yeah.
Right? It's empowering your team. It's about trusting them. It's about having a lot of gratitude and empathy for what they're going through. It's about building a lot of transparency into the organization, good communication. It's about building the right recognition programs. It's about the right support structure. It's about all those kinds of things. And so, look, by the time I got there, by the time I left, we had doubled in size, which was great. That was awesome. And did some really good things. And so I'm really proud of my time there. We even got the award for the best place to work in Orange County, California, which was pretty awesome. And so that was great. That's that's a big highlight for me to do that, to be recognized like that. I think it's pretty awesome. And so, because those things help, and people talk about that stuff, employees talk about that. It's great for recruiting. People feel proud about about those things. And so that's what that's what it was like. And you realize at the end of the day that it doesn't matter if you're in a Fortune 500 company, or in this case a Fortune 50 company, or a $20 million business. People all want the same thing. They want to be respected.
Yeah. Now, kind of hearing you talk about it, I know you said, once again, we valued our people. And I think today we use this cliche, we want to have a good culture, right? And, you say, well, all right, what does that even mean? And to every company, it can mean something different, right? The way I've always looked at company culture is whatever the culture is that you're creating, it'll attract the person that is a good fit for that. And I think about it like sports teams. I played basketball in college, and I went to a college where our coach got in our face and yelled, and I knew that going in, and I appreciated that. Like, I always liked knowing where I sat with the coach. Like I didn't want the coach to give me a pat on the back and take me out of the game. It's like, if I did something wrong, don't like give me a compliment and then take me out. And if I didn't do something wrong, then why am I coming out of the game? Right. Like it always seemed like there was mixed motions. Whereas with the coach I played for, who I elected to go play for, he'd get in your face. He'd tell you exactly what you did wrong. You're like, perfect. I know exactly why I'm out of this game. I'm going to go sit down. So similarly, though, I think within cultures and management styles, there's so many different styles, and none of them are right or wrong. It's just, what are you trying to build and who are you trying to attract? Because the way you operate is going to attract a certain type of person. So talk a little bit about, what you were trying to build there and what ended up leading in the type of culture you guys had that led to receiving that best place to work in Orange County.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're 100% correct, right? So if you think about culture, right, the thing I tell people about culture is that you have to have a culture. I don't care what it is. You have to decide to actually have one.
Yep.
Right. I will tell you this: the days of top down yelling and screaming, we're here to support one person, those days are relatively gone, and they're not going to come back. I don't care what anybody does or says, they're not coming back. Now, are there going to be exceptions to the rule? Sure.
Yep.
There's exceptions to every rule out there, right?
Yes.
Now, with that being said, Deloitte did a survey that said, they asked CEOs around the world, 90% of CEOs said culture matters. It's important. The problem is only 10% actually do anything about it. And the benefit of focusing on culture is it reduces attrition. That's the number one benefit of culture, right? And when you reduce attrition, you improve your bottom line.
Yep.
Because you're not then losing people, and there's not a brain drain happening outside the company.
Yes.
You could, for every one person you leave that's been in the company 3 to 5 years, you literally are screwed for 6 months to a year while that new person you hire gets trained up to figure it all out. Yes. And even then, you're going to miss out. And it's proven that you probably are going to lose a couple of customers along the way.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you think about those things, and you think about that, one of the things I wanted to do at Smart Home and working with, the founder and the team was, we wanted to focus on really building a really strong, communicative, transparent culture. And so we wanted to do things where we were really focused at the end of the day. And this is where I really put a lot of emphasis on, is we wanted our employees to be really understanding of the fact that they are our or my internal customer. So we worry about the external customer a lot, but we don't
Yeah.
focus on the internal customer.
That's really good.
And so they are my customer.
Yeah.
And so in the book, in Chase Greatness, I call this enlightened leadership.
Mm.
And to me, enlightened leadership, and some people read it, oh, it's woke bullshit, whatever. It's not. Because what it says is, Phil, not only am I here to take care of you within the walls of the business, it's what can I do to help support you outside the walls of the business, right?
Yeah.
So it's taken this idea of you're my internal customer, and I'm, I work for you, that servant leadership concept, and just evolving it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where it all started for me, and where we got today. And I think those concepts and those ideas are what allowed us to get that.
I love that. Yeah. I had Brian Scudamore on the show, and he is the founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And one of the things that he does with every person inside the organization is he creates their list of 100 things that they want to accomplish before they die. And he goes, at the end of the year, we do a review, and what things can you cross off the list? And if they don't cross anything off, I highly encourage them to go do one of their 100 things as quickly as humanly possible. And he goes, and then me knowing what they want to accomplish along the way, I try and help them. And I think, to your point, you can't just care about the person from 8:30 to 5, or, whatever the time is, or if they're doing their task, right? Because so much of what we have going on in our personal lives translates into how efficient and good we can be in our professional lives.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I know Brian, he's in YPO and all that stuff. So
yeah.
I know, I've talked to him a few times. And so, look, here's the thing, right? People are right now going, oh my God, there's quiet quitting. And I'm like, so I literally throw my head in my hands, because quiet quitting is people saying, look, I want to work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever my hours are.
Yeah.
I just don't want to work beyond that. Okay, well, I'm paying you to work 9 to 5. I don't expect you to work beyond 5. I want you to go to the gym afterwards, go be with your family, go do yoga, go have a nice meal, go to a movie, go recharge yourself, so tomorrow morning at 9 you're gonna be fine. Because I'll tell you this right now, any problem that person is working on at 7 p.m. can wait till the morning, unless it's some sort of life and death thing, right? Or whatever, right. But you can usually wait. And now, are there exceptions to that? Sure, there always is. Maybe a customer has a deadline or whatever. You got to do it. That's fine. I get it. But to criticize people for not working beyond their assigned hours is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And look, at the end of the day, the people who are motivated to be you or to be me or to be others, want to be CEOs, want to be VPs, want to be in the C-suite, they're going to work beyond those hours anyways. Right? They're going to do it anyway. And so, so that's kind of, it's interesting how it's, and everything's a pendulum, right? And so eventually it'll find a way to come back more in the middle.
Yes. Now, you had mentioned that one of your goals was to be a CEO at some point. And so there becomes this opportunity with 1105 Media to join them and become CEO. So talk a little bit about how you get connected to 1105 and what it's like being the CEO there.
So 1105 is actually my third CEO gig.
Third CEO, okay.
Oh yeah, so 1105 was my third CEO gig. The first one is after I left Smart Home, I joined a startup with this partner, and so we had that, and that business launched when the economy collapsed in 2008. So it was really shitty timing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was around for a few years, and then I was CEO of an audio technology company headquartered out of Zurich, Switzerland. And from there, I did that for a few years. Eventually that company sold to Sennheiser, the headphone manufacturer. And then I was asked there was a board member at 1105 who was also part of the YPO organization.
Got it.
And he called me up and said, hey, I'm on the board of this company. We're looking for a new CEO. I think you'd be really good at it. It's the tech space, and I think you're familiar with some of the brands, and I was from my Dell days. Yeah. And so would you be interested in talking to the guys about this? And so I said, sure. And they said the plus is that they have an office in Irvine, 5 minutes from my house. And, oh, wow. Sign me up. Let's go.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome. And so, so I went through the process, whatever. And it's I just had my 8-year anniversary a couple weeks ago. And so it's been 8 years. It's been a fun ride. And it's been a hell of a journey. And it's been an amazing transformational story, I think, from a business perspective. And I'm not just saying that for my own personal gain here. It has been, because when I joined, the company was a very heavy print-based marketing business, print magazines. Now we have almost no print magazines. So we're very much more a digital and event transformation play. But then when COVID happened, we lost all of our event business. So we went from this high 8-figure business to this kind of low to mid to this mid 8-figure business, literally in a 24-hour window.
Wow.
And because we lost all of our events, and so we're
Yes.
still recovering from that. So, but we recovered in a lot of other places, and got a great culture, and people are doing well, and business financials are the best they've ever been.
Love it. So that kind of brings two different things to mind. One is, I think oftentimes when you are maybe at a position that's lower than the CEO, everyone can look and make a judgment and say, man, I'd love to be the CEO. I would run it this way, or I would do it that way. And then all of a sudden you get in the role and it's like, oh man, like I kind of forgot that if I make that choice, which I would normally make, that there's this repercussion for it, right? And there's a lot more that goes into all of those decisions than what maybe the someone a few rungs down is even thinking about. So talk a little bit about, just your experience of being CEO, knowing that was something you always wanted to do, but then the realities of once it sets in and what it all entails.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me, I think the previous question, you asked me something about when did I know I wanted to be a CEO? Like, I knew I wanted to be a CEO when I was really young.
Yeah.
I really did. I would read books and I'd study up with these people. And like, I knew early on, I knew when I was working for Michael that one day I was going to be a CEO, because I just loved that idea of being there, what he did. And so for me, this was, I mean, there's still more I want to do in my life, but being here today has been absolutely an amazing joy for me. And I'm so grateful for everything and everyone who's enabled me to be here. But, the thing about decisions, Phil, is the thing I tell people all the time, and tell my team, is you can make good decisions and you can make bad decisions. Here's the thing: you can't fix a no decision. Right?
Yeah.
People have analysis paralysis, right? So I tell people, look, get your facts and make the best decision you think is in mind for your customer base.
Yep.
That's all you can do, right? Are you making the best? Don't make the best decision for you personally. Make the best decision for your customers. Because if you're making the best decision for your customers, ultimately it's going to be the best decision for yourself, right? Make that decision. And then, by the way, you have two sets of customers, right? Your internal customer and your external customer, right? Yep. And I tell people all the time, I go, look, you have to drive the revenue first. It might break the organization. You may not have enough support for that, but it's a lot easier to bring on some temps and other people to support that revenue generation that you're building, versus building on a whole bunch of expense and then hoping the revenue comes.
Yes.
You got to do the other way around. So in this case, you do want to focus on driving the external customer and then support the internal customer in this case that you're referring to. Because if you don't have that external revenue, you don't have any internal customers anyways. And so that's kind of where you are. And so, look, you just got to make the decision. And by the way, if you make a bad decision, who gives a shit? People fuck up all the time. People make a bad decision all the time. I mean, I've made plenty of bad decisions. It happens, right?
Yes.
And so, just who cares? Fix it. Move on. Yes. That's why you're in the job. You're in the job to. You're in the job to. You're in the job because you demonstrated you make decisions, and you make good decisions. You make bad decisions, but more importantly, you're willing to stand up and fix the bad decisions.
So on that note, I think, a lot of that stems from a level of confidence, right? Having the confidence to make the decision, but then also having the confidence to know if it's not the right choice, I will be able to remedy this. I will figure it out. And my guess is, for you and your career, confidence grew over time after you had proven to yourself that, hey, even, these were good decisions, but even if I made the wrong choice, I was still able to kind of course correct and get back to where I was going. So maybe speak into that a little bit, just the idea of confidence and growing confidence over time after you've made, multiple decisions over your career.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've always been the one to raise my hand first.
Yeah.
When they say, oh, who wants to go first? No, I'll raise my hand. Someone's got to go first. I'll go first.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, those types of things, I have zero problem. I have zero problem trying to be, I'm not the best athlete in the world, but I'm happy to stand up to the plate and swing the bat with the bottom of the ninth and 2 outs, and there's whatever, right? I have no problem swinging the bat. right? I have no problem if you told me, Rajeev, I want you to get your book and go sit in front, take your book and go read in front of 50,000 people at Dodger Stadium. Okay, no problem. So for me, I have always had this kind of quiet confidence about myself to do that. But having that confidence, it really shows. It's kind of infectious, right?
Yeah.
Right, and people look to that. Like your teams are going to look to that confidence, right? If you are panicked, then people are going to really panic as well.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example. So in March 14, 2020, when the state of emergency was declared and we had to shut down everything, we had to cancel all of our events. And Phil, we lost half our business in a 24-hour window.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't like, a lot of times companies go like this in the revenue. We went from this to that.
Yeah.
Like literally we were doing this to that.
Right.
And it's like you're going 100 miles an hour and you slam into this wall and the car shatters. And for that, there was a 48-hour window where I'm kind of just sitting there going, what the do we do?
Yeah.
There's no Harvard case study to go. There's no mentor to call. I couldn't call he'd never been through this.
Yeah.
Right. There's no books on the bubonic plague from the 20s or whatever it was I could go study.
Yeah.
Right. People are now making this a political hot potato. It's like, what are you guys doing? Are you guys stupid? And so everywhere you look, you have people were in fear for their lives. Those that weren't in fear for their lives were in fear for their jobs. People didn't know what was going to happen to their kids. People didn't know what was. You drive around, the streets are empty. How are people? It's like, what do you do? And so there was a 48-hour window there where I started questioning my own ability. Now, through my smile and through my smile and my jovial attitude, inside I was really panicked, but I couldn't show them that. I was really worried. Like I didn't know what to do. So that 40-hour window went by, and I said, all right, enough of the pity party. Let's go figure it out. And so we went and figured it out. And so, I hope that, in 20 years, when they write case studies, they're going to write case studies about organizations that really survived and went go figure it out. And, and we were one of those that figured it out.
I love it. Now, as you've grown in your capacity and in your knowledge, you decide, hey, maybe I should put this into a book, something that can not only help people, but can last for a very, very long time. So talk a little bit about, your book and really what was the inspiration to get the ideas down on paper.
So, I kind of had the idea of the book in my head for a long time. This idea of enlightened leadership. I really didn't know what to call it at the time. But I kind of gave an example of how I kind of used it back at the smart home days and some of the Dell days, stuff like that. I just didn't know, just didn't have a name for it at the time, right? And so when COVID hit, one of the things I realized two things. Number one was I kind of watched that Simon Sinek TED Talk start, what's your why? I hadn't seen it before, right? Who hasn't seen it? It's awesome, right? Yeah. And Simon does a great job. And so I kind of watched that again. And I wanted to figure out what my why was. And my why, I realized, was to figure out how to honor other people's dreams.
Cool.
So I realized that if I was figuring out how to honor other people's dreams, I was going to get through this. And I needed this for my own mental health because there was no one for me to talk to as a CEO. Like my board had no idea what the hell to do. No one knew, right? Yeah. And so something hit me was, when you get on an airplane, what's one of the things the flight attendant says in the pre-flight discussion? What does she say? Or what does he say? Put your mask on before you give someone else. Put your own mask on first before you put on someone else's mask. And the reason why they do that is because they say, look, if you become incapacitated, you can't help the kid next to you or the older parent next to you or the person next to you. Yeah. So put on your own mask first, then worry about that. And I realized I had to put on my own mask first. Otherwise, I was not going to be able to find a way to take care of my team and those around me. And so I said, you know what? I've always wanted to write this book. Maybe it could be cathartic for me. I had notes everywhere. I had notes scribbled everywhere. Yeah. So I just kind of started writing. I didn't really know what to do. I kind of went on Reddit and YouTube and other places and Googled and stuff like that and figured out formatting. It kind of came up with an outline, started filling it all out. And then I found a publisher who got me an editor and everything, and they helped kind of fill in some blanks. And it was a lot. It was great. It was a fun journey. And I wrote the book, and it was the most downloaded on Kindle business, leadership, and culture book for almost 12 weeks on Amazon.
Wow.
The audio book now is just rolling out, and I talk a lot about my journey here at 1105 and other places. And the audiobook's available right now on Spotify. So you got to go to spotify.com to get the audiobook. And hopefully in the next few weeks, it'll be rolling out into Audible and other places. And so, but at least it's on Spotify now. And so, yeah, but it's something, and so it's been a hell of a journey, and it's been great. And, I learned a lot in the process about myself, and I like, and so I think it's really helped. I get messages from people randomly on LinkedIn and other places on Instagram and say, "Hey, I got your book. I really love it. And I did this in my company, and I did this in that my company." And so it's been great to see it having such an impact on people.
I love it. I love it. Well, Rajeev, I want to say thanks so much for being on the show and just sharing your story and the pivotal moments that have, led to where you're at today. And excited to watch your journey and continue to follow your journey and see where it takes you from here.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate it. And thanks the audience for listening. And I hope you got some value. And if I can ever help anybody, let me know.
Thank you.